Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Cindy W., Brent S., Michael N., and Kent P. On the discussions program today is a returning guest. Mr. Keith Bodnarchuk is back with us to update. Keith is the president and CEO of Cosa Resources. The company is focused on uranium exploration in Canada's Athabasca Basin, on the established eastern side of the basin, with a portfolio of prospective uranium exploration grounds, including its strategic partnership on exploration with Denison Mines, where Cosa holds a 70% interest in 3 projects: Murphy Lake North, Darby, and Packrat. The company also has 100% owned uranium projects, including Ursa, Orion, and other projects in its portfolio. Cosa Resources is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol COSA and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol COSAF. Keith, welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be back, Andrew.
Yeah, Keith, good to have you back on, chat a few things on company updates. And it's been an interesting first nearly 7 months here in the year. Interesting times out there in the space and also outside of the space in the broad market. But I want to get straight to news items, Keith. The company just announced that it is starting a 3,000 meter follow-up drill program at Murphy Lake North. Talk about the plans here, including where those first couple of holes are planned to go, and of course, following up on that hole MLN 25-004 along the hurricane trend.
So this is really the most exciting time of the year for us. You know, the drill is officially turning on our Murphy Lake North joint venture, where obviously we're a 70% owner. Denison Mines is a 30% owner of that project. As you mentioned, we have 3,000 meters planned. That's 8 drill holes. So it is quite a shallow project in the Athabasca Basin terms. So we will manage to get eight good drill holes to drill throughout the course of this program. And really, that's the largest program to date ever on the project. And it's also really the most holes we've ever drilled as a company. You know, this is really our second year drilling as a company overall, Cosa. And this is our second drill program at Murphy Lake North, having drilled those 4 holes in the early part of 2025. The drill plan really is to focus on these 2 trends. We obviously have the hurricane trend, which is an extension of the trend that contains a hurricane deposit, which is owned by ISO Energy. You know, it's the highest grade indicated uranium resource in the world, one that our group is very familiar with, having discovered it during our time at ISO Energy. So our focus is on that trend and also the subparallel cyclone trend. Importantly, our JV partner and largest shareholder, Denison, has agreed to fund its portion to maintain its 30% interest in the project itself. You know, so that obviously helps share the cost, but it also validates that, you know, we both really want to be part of the targets we're testing here. As far as the hurricane trend goes, you did mention the 4th hole from the winter program. We did intersect some interesting results there, and we're going to follow those up right away with the initial holes while also testing the cyclone trend. And so, yeah, it's exciting. Like I said, the most exciting time of the year for us. The drill is turning, which is the biggest catalyst for a company like us, is to have success with that drill bit.
Keith, absolutely. This is everything. You guys are in the highest risk business. You guys also have some very good experience being able to do what you've done on past discoveries right where you are presently. So there's a lot of positive things. But of course, you know, that first drill program, very rarely do you get something amazing, but it takes some time, a little bit of study and some adjustment to get there. So you guys are mobilized to site. You guys are already drilling. Talk just a little bit here about what you would foresee as far as schedule here. Maybe you can just walk through a couple milestones you would expect here over the next couple months for the audience and for investors.
Yeah, certainly. So the program itself will take, it's like I said, it's shallow drilling. Like the target depth we're going is 200 to 250 meters down. And for perspective, you know, Denison's Phoenix deposit is about 400 meters down. McArthur River is deeper than that. So we are testing very shallow targets. And so the holes will be over with quite quickly. You know, you have 3 to 4 days per drill hole. Then you move on to the next one, and we'll update the market as soon as we can on these initial results. And if we intersect anything, any sort of radioactivity or something, we'd be happy to report that to the market to provide updates. as we continue to drill. And so that'll be, what we focus on here over the next few months, is just really updating the market on these drilling results. And then obviously any sort of assays or geochemical results would be a few months after that. But lots of steady news flow here, and we're extremely excited by the targets. I think he did mention that fourth hole, and it is important, like you mentioned, that it's you don't always find these things with the very first drill hole. That's usually not how it works in uranium exploration. Uranium exploration is it's exciting, but it can be painful, right? It takes a long time sometimes, and it takes a lot of attempts before you ultimately make that discovery. But when you do, you're drilling some of the most valuable rock on the planet in the Athabasca Basin itself. And so when we set out and did that initial program in the winter of 2025 at Murphy Lake North, it was almost like an orientation program. We wanted to prove that the hurricane trend continued on to the northern part of our project. And so when Andy, our VP exploration, the team went out and started drilling, they started to get key indicators of what we look for. First off, the rock types were what we want. The next thing was we started to hit structure, which we like fault zones, certain things that we look for that are associated with the hurricane deposit itself. The next box you'd look to tick is alteration. Was the sandstone that lies above the potential uranium deposit, was it destroyed? Was there lots of alteration? We saw that. And now the next key things we would look for is maybe stronger alteration in parts, and then ultimately radioactivity or uranium mineralization. So when you went through the checklist of what we're looking for, and considering we only drilled 4 drill holes, we started to tick a lot of those boxes. And that's why I'm excited to get back there, follow up that fourth hole, and also importantly test that cyclone trend, because it's not a one trick project, right? We have multiple trends there that need testing. And when you take a step back and look at the project, it's a long trend of, like I said, of hurricane deposit. It's seen limited drilling. It's at shallow depth. It really ticks all those boxes of what you look for and where you'd ultimately want to make a discovery.
I appreciate you going through that, and definitely excited to see what we have coming up here. Talk just a little bit about, so hurricane trend is where you guys are going to start first. Over to the cyclone trend, just give the differential here between hurricane and cyclone as far as the trend goes. And then I assume roughly the same depth you guys are going to test over here, but just talk about some of the testing plans over on cyclone.
So the cyclone trend has seen limited to no testing in the past. Even if you don't consider the hurricane deposit as long is in that within that vicinity, if you just took that cyclone trend by itself and you looked at its geophysical signature, its depth, its lack of drilling, its orientation, everything like that ticks the boxes of where you'd want to explore. So even as a standalone target, it's tremendous. And then when you factor in, it's obviously parallel to the hurricane trend. It's right next to the hurricane deposit. It really upgrades of what we're looking for there. And we have 5 kilometers of open space of this cyclone trend. The good thing is with Denison, they obviously did tremendous geophysics, and they've did a lot of work into the projects. Prior to us prior to us acquiring 70% interest, and they have great targets that we're going to utilize here to test. And 5 kilometers is a lot of space in the Athabasca Basin. For perspective, the hurricane deposit is 120 meters long. And Phoenix deposit, the main part of the Phoenix deposit is about 250 meters long. So these things are tiny, but they're high grade and they're very dense deposits themselves. And so that's what excites us. We have all this space in a location where it's probably one of the most important areas in the Athabasca Basin over the past 5-6 years. And so that's what excites us about the cyclone. We have a lot of good targets there, a lot of space, and it's seen limited exploration.
Sounds as if we'll have news potentially in the coming weeks, and then also we'll have stuff all the way on the back end. Could see stuff in September, October as well coming out of the project.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys had mentioned by news release that you're working on reviewing past drill data on the Darby project. Talk about what you're doing there to determine future drill targets, and if there'll be any news coming out of the review as far as findings.
Yeah, so definitely. So I think the big thing too with that transaction with Denison was that it was also acquiring the Darby project. I really view that Darby and Murphy Lake North as kind of a 1A, 1B type scenario. And Darby's a much larger project too. So it has a lot of runway and a lot of targets. So an exercise that we always do, I mean, it worked for us at ISO Energy. when our group discovered the Hurricane deposit. Is basically we go onto site, we look through the old core. Sometimes it's 20, 30 years old. It's covered in bugs and bats and in rotten core boxes and stuff. But we go through and you start reviewing the core in a detailed manner to look what past operators did. Because if you don't do that, you're really trusting what maybe a junior geologist in the 1980s put into a paper log, right? You're trusting what people are reporting when you haven't had a chance to see it yourself. And so it's an exercise we always do before we actually start drilling on a project. Murphy Lake North was different because it didn't have much drilling. And obviously we're very familiar with that area, based on the Hurricane deposit. But with Darby, there's a significant amount of drilling that's been done there. Because it is a much larger project. And the interesting thing about the drilling that's been done there, it's done enough that it really paints a picture about what's happening underneath the ground, but it hasn't been drilled enough where it's really killed off any areas. And so Andy and the team went there, and Steve, our chairman, went there too to go look at old core, because these guys have seen a lot of discoveries. They've seen a lot of drilling over their past 20 years in the Athabasca Basin. And so from that, we're going to do some target generation, and we should be able to utilize that in our 2026 drill program, which will be our inaugural drill program at Darby, which is on pace for about Q1 in 2026. And so, Darby is a very important project for us. We take our time. We're very methodical with the targets we're going to be drilling there. And, I think we're very excited by what the guys found, and we'll update the market when we can about target generation on that project. But, Darby and Murphy Lake North, like I said, are very important projects to us. And so we were excited to this exercise. It's worked for us in the past, and kind of a rinse and repeat type approach, right? That's been successful for us in the past.
Excellent. We'll have targets selected and all that research work will be done over the next coming 6 months or so. And then you guys will get on the ground there in early 2026. That's good. So that ties in with how does things look on the funding front here, Keith? You guys have a current drill program, field investigation, and desktop work to do,
Yep.
and then you have Darby. Talk about how the funding will carry you into Darby and just how you're looking at the budget to that first tickling of some holes there.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, obviously up until we did the Denison transaction, we did have projects that we really like in Ursa, Orion, the ones you named there, 100% owned ones, but they were a bit on the deeper side. So it was more costly exploration in those areas. And the big thing with this Denison transaction was that we got terrific projects with really, great potential of making a discovery, but they're also quite shallower and cost effective. And so our dollars are going to go a lot further exploring these projects, Murphy Lake North and Darby. And so, we currently have about $5 million Canadian in the treasury. That'll easily take us through the Murphy Lake North program we're currently drilling. And, that could fund us through the Darby project in early 2026 and still be in a good position financially. And especially with Denison coming in and paying their 30% portion of Murphy Lake North, that reduced our costs by a significant amount. And so we're in a position now where, despite this inflationary environment, we can really put our dollars to work. And our focus is, drill as much as we can. We obviously continue to do target generation. We'd have other projects like Cosmo, Orion, where we are doing some geophysics, but the vast, vast majority of our dollars right now are going towards drilling, because that's our biggest catalyst. And with this Denison transaction, we have drill ready targets, walk up targets, throughout Murphy Lake North and Darby. So that's where our dollars are going to go, and our dollars can extend a lot further now with this transaction, with this shallower, cost-effective exploration.
Yeah, good to hear there. So it sounds like we've got a good position, good runway to go forward here.
Yeah.
If the market continues to be jittery, we know that some people have gotten their hopes up over the last few weeks, Keith, on the back of a few events in the market, but also there's a lot of overshadowing events that are impacting this uranium market. And so we've seen this time and time again. Not heavily excited over here. We're in protection mode, and I know you guys very carefully look at the budgeting and the funding moving forward here so you guys can navigate some of these choppy times in the market here as you guys move towards discovery success. So appreciate the information on how you're looking at the budget and how far we have on runway. You mentioned just briefly other projects, the 100% owned projects,
Mm-hmm.
any work that'll be done as far as a little bit of geophysics, any
Mm-hmm.
other work you want to mention on the other projects? We know the main effort is Murphy Lake North and Darby, but any other little things you guys will be working on in parallel?
So we also have a JV agreement with a group called Global Uranium. They are earning in on our Astro project. That's one that, with the Denison transaction, we weren't going to be able to get around to some of these projects. We do like to really keep a pipeline of drill ready targets for ourselves because that's important, especially in uranium exploration, right? Like you have to be versatile. You have to be ready to move on from a project if it's not showing what you like. And that's the approach we've always taken, kind of the drill it and kill it and be ready to go with a whole bunch of different tier one type targets. And Astro, we weren't going to get around to exploring it, so we did a transaction with Global, good value for both sides. And they're doing some airborne geophysics. They might be doing some more work here early into next year and stuff. So I think we do have a lot of news flow in and around all these projects that we have. But importantly, our focus really is Murphy Lake North. And then if we have success there, obviously we can go back and drill that next winter alongside Darby too. And that's the beauty that we have with the current treasury being in good shape like it is, but also the cost effective exploration we can do.
As we know from past experience and your guys' past discovery success with Hurricane, even in poor market times, discovery success is well rewarded. So definitely can appreciate the pipeline and the efforts you guys have been able to carry that pipeline, look at some strategic moves such as monetization JV, and then also maintaining the core projects as well. So that's good stuff. So Keith, short of any other things you wanted to add in here as far as updates, why don't we leave it there for now? And I'll leave you with our wrap up question here. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 17.5 million Canadian dollars. Why should Cosa Resources be considered within the institutional, family, office, and retail investors portfolio at this point?
So I think when you go through a checklist, when you want to invest in a junior company, you start going through the list of what you look for. You look for, catalysts, upcoming catalysts. Well, we're drilling currently. That means it's one of the best times to invest in an exploration company. We have great looking targets. Next is access to capital. Our treasury is in good shape. We're a group that puts our own money into Cosa. We have obviously increased our access to capital with our transaction with Denison Mines, where they were supportive during our last financing, and they're also supportive at a project level. And as skin in the game, which I mentioned, we do support our own stories. Finally, the team and track record. We've done it. Obviously, ISO Energy. We mentioned the Hurricane deposit, but our experience goes beyond that, right? Denison Mines. I got my start really right after Denison discovered Phoenix deposit. I spent majority of my time working on Phoenix. Steve Blower, our chairman, was part of their Griffin discovery and also the expansion of the Phoenix deposit. So we're a team that's managed to do it at every stop along the way in the uranium space, and we're looking to do it again here.
Very straightforward story here. And of course, as we've said before, SmithWeekly is an investor in this as well, and it's in our model portfolio. So the audience can take that for what that's worth and do their own work, of course. And we think we do have a lot of good things happening here that are going to carry this company forward, including another discovery success. Keith, what is the best way for folks to reach out for further information?
Yeah, definitely. So visit our website for sure. That's cosaresources.ca. You can get a hold of us on there. You can get a hold of us. There's an email on there, and any social media. We do have X, LinkedIn, all that stuff that you can really get a hold of us. And we do regularly check our email if people want to reach out to us. So we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Keith, well, best of luck on this current program at Murphy Lake North. Really appreciate the update. Looking forward to seeing these results coming out and hoping you'll come back and update here in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.